Matt Walsh, he's milked the transphobia almost to like its natural endpoint. Every other issue for him, you know, he has to be, in his mind, I feel like, on the edgier side of the spectrum, because Matt Walsh is just not very talented. This is him basically in talking about great replacement theory without saying the words great replacement theory. But here he is on his program.
And so there are really two parts of the story. The first is the story itself, which is the demographic trend, where whites are trending towards extinction in the United States. Like that's the way it's headed.
What?
And then the other part of the story is the veil of silence around this issue, the wall that is erected around it. I know you're going to say, well, you just read a story about it, so there's not a silence. Yeah, they can report on it. So you report and you celebrate diversity, and then you just move on. We don't talk about it. We don't think much about it, and that's it. You aren't allowed to talk much about it. You certainly can't be concerned about it. You're not allowed to express any concern. That's unthinkable.
Yeah.
To hear that whites are on their way to minority status and the white population is declining, the worst thing you could possibly do is to talk about it at all is already a problem, but to suggest that there's any reason at all to be concerned about that, or to be anything less than thrilled by that development is incredibly racist, we're told.
Sorry, like, this is not happening. Like, of all live births in the United States during 2018, 2020, 52% were white. Like, that I'm not sure what numbers he goes, but like, where are white people going to go?
He's just fear-mongering, right? He's trying to stoke those great replacement.
Do you have any idea what article he's talking about?
I mean, Tucker Carlson would do the same thing. No, I don't. Maybe Bradley, you can, or one of you guys can find it. But it is. He says, you know, you're not allowed to say this. Well, I am saying it, but you're not allowed.
Oh, you guys talk
to
about
feel bad about it. And the point is that, like, yeah, kind of, you're not allowed to feel bad about it, because whiteness, in the way that it's actually been constructed,
it's a political
in this country,
project.
Yeah, it's a right-wing political project, and it's been pretty detrimental. So when you privilege the preservation of whiteness, that is a derivation of white supremacy, and quite similar to what people in, say, the KKK have been talking about, and we're talking about historically.
But I'm sorry, like, if Matt Walsh wants to live in a like majorly white country, he can go live in Europe somewhere. They do a better job than us at keeping out non-white people, and I think it's good, the diversity in this country, and to the extent that it's growing, I think that's in spite of like the white supremacist foundations of this country. I think that's good.
You also have to understand that this isn't like you know, he's like, white people aren't going extinct like he said. Like, what he's complaining about is basically like mixed race relationships. Like, white people are marrying and having kids with people of all sorts of different backgrounds.
Miscegenation, yeah.
And they're not pure white children anymore. Oh my God! Oh no! I mean, who cares?
White supremacists
who cares? Yeah.
Since when can't you say this stuff? Like, the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire was just with tweeting out the 14 words like last week. Like, people talk about white genocide all the time. It's just what he means is that, you know, and I would say, like, this is not even true. Like, you have to code it, because he's just coming out and like more or less saying it. And he's mad that like people might interpret it the way that he means. But I don't understand. Like, he's not even making an argument for like why we need more white people.
Yeah.
He's
it's all the meta,
that, like,
I'm being censored and they don't want you to hear this, which is classic. Like, what
they do that every time.
Nazi shit.
Bradley just sent this to me, and he thinks it might be a reference to a Brookings study from last week that says Gen Z may be the last generation with a white majority, which is like,
who cares?
I don't care.
Who gives an absolute shit about that?
I apparently white supremacists, right? Because they literally, that is the definition of supremacy. They want to be like both supreme in their purity and like in what their perception is of Western civilization and in their numbers.
Yeah.
So the fear that they're tapping into is like, you might not be the most powerful race or conception of like of who belongs in like the power structure in this country. That might change soon, and that's very scary to you. And like, you can't say this. Tucker Carlson had been saying this on his program, the most highly rated popular cable news show until he got canned, for years and years. This was a staple of his broadcast.
Well, like, why can't you say it? It's because like any sort of thinking society thinks it's hysterical Nazi shit. Like, yeah, you can say it, but people are going to reach conclusions about you.
Well, yeah, because he doesn't really have a justification outside of white supremacy, or, you know, this idea that like an influx of non-white people, whether by birth or by immigration, is going to lead to some sort of inherent degradation of the social order, which is like definition of like Nazi fear mongering. It's like, you know, if demographics are shifting because of mixed race couples, that kind of implies that these couples are going to be producing children that are of a certain socioeconomic class, either because they are in that class themselves or because they're marrying somebody within that class. Like, it's not an inherent thing to do with whiteness. Like, it's, you know, just the nature of people marrying. We're still very segregated by socioeconomic status. So if someone is in fact marrying someone outside their race, there's a likeliness that they're of the same socioeconomic status, the same education status, all of these things that go along with the way we divide people in the society. Probably the only thing different about them is the fact that they're non-white. And so that is really just the thing that you're complaining about.
Yeah, exactly. And he goes on. This is him talking more about this, expanding on this idea. And he's bringing in some of the eco-fascism that is now a staple of the European right. When we spoke to Kyle Bailey about Finland, their economic minister had to resign because he was promoting the idea that we should give women abortions in Africa in order to control the population. Tucker Carlson had said similar kinds of things on his show at the time in relationship to the border. And here's Matt Walsh, again, not as talented as other right-wing pundits, but trying very desperately to be one of those guys, incorporating that into his show.
We know that it doesn't even need to be said, but I'll say it anyway, because we all know that's true. But we know that the continued existence.
Okay, and that's a really like fascist trope, that there are these eternal truths, and you can't say it, but we know which race is superior. We know just based on because of who's traditionally been in power, and we don't need to analyze power and systemic issues outside of the results of those systems. Those systems are inherent and good and godly.
Look, we all know what we're not saying, am I right? But I'm going to toe up to the line right now.
Yes.
It's a reactionary appeal to like common sense. This idea that like the world is totally understandable by like what you can view outside of your own like window, and also what you view on like Matt Walsh's show. It's like, it goes all the way back to how they're trying to confuse that woman on Fox News about like why her son can't afford a place. It's like they just want you to come to them for the answer to a question that they can't possibly give you the real answer to.
Let's keep going.
We know that it doesn't even need to be said, but I'll say it anyway, because we all know that's true. But we know that the continued existence of any other race of people is considered deeply important, and the preservation of the historical and traditional racial identity of any nation is considered deeply important.
It's not.
So, for example, if there was an influx of white immigration to a historically black country,
like South Africa,
and that was resulting in a giant demographic shift wherein it was becoming a predominantly white country rather than predominantly black, this would be considered a major, major problem.
Can you pause it? Yeah, right. Okay. So
who's colonizing us?
Yes.
Yeah.
No one's. The problem for him is that there is no equivalent of colonialism with brown or black people,
because we actually brought him here, whether it was from slave ships or putting our border further and further south and west.
He's making a claim that he doesn't even know that he's making, which is that like colonialism and power and capitalism are intrinsically tied to the way that we've conceived whiteness.
Yeah.
Matt Walsh seems to believe that because people come here from other countries, he's living under like apartheid U.S. Like, what is like what is going on? Like, does he not know what actually?
I mean,
why it wasn't just white people going to Africa. It was a lot more than that.
I'm not ready to take off the table that we should treat Walsh like a Boer, but anyway.
I mean, I'm not willing to take off the table that like he's maybe felt unwelcome in certain areas where there are black people, and for that,
Especially if they know who he is.
Especially if they know who he is. Especially if he acts the way that he does. So that's a bonus for me.
Demographic shift wherein it was becoming a predominantly white country rather than predominantly black. This would be considered a major, major problem. And there's no doubt about it. And yet, in the reverse, it is either neutral or cause for celebration. But really, it should be a cause for celebration.
No one's celebrating anything.
And you know what? This pertains even to the animal kingdom. I mean, you can think of there's a particular type of, I don't know, hummingbird.
Oh, got invasive species discourse happening.
Even for that, we're supposed to panic. If I were to say, hey, whatever, I mean, what does it matter? So we don't have that type of hummingbird. We got plenty of other hummingbirds. What does it matter what type of hummingbird it is? Yeah. The difference doesn't make.
White people are platypus.
So yeah, this type of hummingbird is there's more of that and there's less of this. Like, who cares? Okay. If I say that, I'm callous.
But sorry, Matt Walsh definitely does not give a shit about any animal going extinct. So what kind of concern is he trying to drape himself in here?
Also, if 52% of the birds in a place were hummingbirds, we wouldn't be say they're on the road to extinction. That would be ridiculous.
Yeah,
because their voting power relative to robins is decreased.
I mean. But notice, obviously, how he's likening non-white people to animals. I mean, he's using an innocuous example of a hummingbird, but we know what he's getting at.
I mean, this is just the way you view race when you just completely strip it of any of its historical and cultural context, and you treat it like it's a biological reality, which is what they want you to do, and which is what I would describe as inherently racist, like an inherently racist thing to do. And so, but also, when you do it that way, it does allow you to strip it away of all of the historical and cultural context that allow you to say, well, yeah, but the reason why it's bad when you say the N word, but not bad when you say cracker is because of the context in which both those words exist within, like the historical and cultural one. We don't not say it because it makes people feel bad. And it's like this stripping away of all power and all different hierarchies that they have to rely on to make these sort of crazy racist statements seem as though they're just rooted in a type of egalitarianism, where it's you can't do that. If you did that to a black person, that would be considered racist. It's yeah, because of all the other racist shit that happens.
Yeah, and here's why black people and Latino migrants are an invasive species that are going to wipe everybody else out.
They're like hummingbirds.
Yeah.
The difference doesn't make. So yeah, this type of hummingbird is there's more of that and there's less of this. Who cares?
Zero sum.
If I say that, I'm callous. Because no, it's very important that we have all varieties of hummingbirds. Every variety is very, very important.
So self-pitying.
Keep them all around. Every animal in the animal kingdom, we got to keep them all around. It's extremely important. If any particular variety starts to dwindle, if any particular type of species of animal gets driven out of its territory.
Race isn't a species either. That's another
very bad.
Yeah. Another makes this a bad analogy. For a person who's always talking about gender as though he's I'll say another curse word, but he's a scientist or a doctor, he doesn't seem to understand that species and race are not the same thing. Just because they're both categories of things doesn't make them the same in terms of their biological or genetic importance.
This is deeply rooted in really white supremacist territory. They usually use the dog breed analogy about how people are. Why can't we all people? We're not. We're all people, regardless of what their race is, are Homo sapiens. We're all.
Yep. That's what he's mad about. That we can't breed.
Yes.
Oh, and the thing is, he's also frustrated. No, bro, you just fucking put on that Confederate flag T-shirt that you've been pictured in when you were younger, which you say you were wearing for a skit or whatever. Just be a Confederate. Just be a Nazi.
Yeah.
It's stop. Just own it, man.
And stop going. If I say this, the action will be this. I mean, I literally want to strike that kind of conceit from right-wing discourse unilaterally and see if they have any arguments to provide, because it's all just if I say say this, I'm going to get in trouble. So I'm saying it, but then just say it. Then actually say you believe in great replacement theory. Then actually believe that, say what you believe, that you think that black people and white people have genetic differences and that one of them is invasive and wrong.
If they don't do it that way, they do that thing where they like find a single article or single like no follower account and they just go like, see what people are saying out there? This is not my opinion. This is just like a random opinion from someone else that exists out there that I find interesting. Question mark? Like everyone can't see through that game too.
But there's such important rhetorical devices because I think even if Walsh is being whiny and it's like annoying to listen to, it's also like inciting. Like it's a real mode of incitement that the primary, I think the details don't really matter. I think one of the primary purposes is Matt Walsh being like, you are being told by other people, whoever they might be, or other organizations or other, arms of the government, arms of like liberal organizations, that like you're not allowed to express your opinions or you're not allowed to have like free thought or free speech. I think it's enough to like make people be like, oh, like if that's a paramount right that we're supposed to be imparted by our constitution or whatever, like that's worth like being violent over. That's worth like trying to stamp this out. Like I think as much of it is just a rhetorical device, it's also like it's extremely it's effective in a pernicious way to be like, you are being told this and it's not my fault, but like maybe help me out by doing something that I won't do.
The flip side of this is like I don't consider myself a communist because I'm not a paid up member of any communist party. But I don't sit here and say there is nothing between there's no similarity between what I believe and what a communist believe because I'm not afraid of that association. You want to call me a communist? Call me a communist. And Matt Walsh should feel the exact same way about white supremacists because the extent that he's like not an actual like March and Klan guy or like I would love to see what group chats he's in. But like, just own it, man. Just own that you are fellow travelers with Nazis.
Well, I mean, they know that this stuff isn't popular. Like, despite what like fascists and neo-fascists. Well, I mean, the avowed ones definitely know this, but like, fascism is the most discredited ideology of the last 200 or so years. You can't identify as a fascist anywhere and not expect to get like punched in the face. And so, half of the work that these people have to do is launder fascist discourse and talking points into like mainstream conversations as though they're just like questions or just like normal ideas that no one has ever had before. And so why can't we entertain them as though like it's the first time hearing it, when in reality, we've already debated all things that, not we as in the people in the show, but scientists, doctors, politicians, people who talk about genocides have already talked about what he's talking about. And they've all come to the same conclusion that it like is not true. And it is the telltale signs of like fascist ideology. And so all they can do is try to confuse you about what fascism contains and what like white supremacy contains, and just start, talking about like control of the railways, like in the, in the Barbie movie, like so like,
or that it's like cultural fascism. I mean, Jimmy Dore said on his show that Biden was more fascist than Trump.
Right. Well, lesser evil Jimmy Dore voting for Republican.
Yeah, and it's
the
just
Dark Brandon meme is very frightening.
That's the thing, though, is like what they're good at too is obscuring what does white supremacy mean? What does fascism mean? These words are bad, but they're not you, even though this is exactly what I'm advocating for. It's really the left that's more like that, and it's they'll discard with the terms very quickly. They'll dispense with them once they use them to attack, and the attack is the primary motivator, not like the substance of anything. So, well, Matt Walsh, horrible and pathetic. Let's take another call, shall we? Calling from a 616 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Nick from Michigan. I called in last week.
Oh, Nick from Michigan. You're having some good luck getting your call picked up. What's on your mind?
No, thank you. I called in during the last majority report.
Wow.
Well, one, I have a couple things. So when I called in last week, I was talking about that oil line in the Straits of Mackinac.
Yeah.
That our friend from Canada mispronounced. But I just want to say, I think it was a really low blow for him to compare me to Tim Pool. I'm not going to stoop to that level. I think as progressives, we have to stick together and boost each other, not bring each other down.
Yes.
And I'm not advocating for a quarter of Canada to go out of power. I just think a 70-year-old pipeline that's rated to last for 50 years shouldn't be going through the Great Lakes.
I think that's very, very fair, Nick.
But really what I wanted to talk about was I really appreciate the interview that you guys had on Monday with the author of Mad World.
Yes.
As someone who has been dealing with mental health issues, I think this is something that I've talked about with my therapist. I highly recommend if you can. It's really hard to get therapy because it's so expensive. And when I lost my job, I lost insurance, and that was really stressful. But just a big factor with like mental health care in America is how individualized everything is. And while yes, everybody has unique circumstances, it's not independent of societal factors. And I think it's great that you guys had her on to talk about that, and it's a great conversation to keep having. So, those were the 2 points I wanted to talk about. Thanks for talking about mental health care, and please don't compare me to Tim Pool. So,
well, we certainly did not do that. I
know. You guys pushed back against that, and I appreciate it. And our friend from Canada can learn if he just goes to oilandwater.mix.org, read about Line 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also just generally, don't tell me that engineers said a pipeline is going to be this X safe, because that's their job to say that.
Yeah, right. Appreciate the call, Nick.
Yeah, thanks so much. Keep up the great work, everybody. And then just before I go, I know Michael's birthday is coming up, so rest in power, Michael. I loved when you, Emma, and you, Brandon, were guests on the Michael Brooks show before you guys started appearing on the Majority Report, and I was super excited when you guys started showing up on the Majority Report too. So just keep up the great work.
Well, appreciate that, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
Yep, you too.
When I watched that Donald Trump clip of him roasting Chris Christie, like, I knew Michael would have loved that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty great.
I mean, like, yeah, it's a shame. We're kind of talking, like, it looks like our primary season might flame out a little bit. I mean, look, there's still big events that could happen with Trump and his legal situation, right? So, like, I don't want to say, like, the flames out, but DeSantis is completely withered, and there's really nobody else.
Yeah.
I think, though, that Trump's legal problems, I know I was pessimistic before we started the show, but they might run, like the people who are running against him, his opponents, the myriad of them, like they might run hoping that he's forced to drop out because
that's absolutely why.
That's DeSantis's whole campaign strategy. That's why he won't still like really attack Trump.
So they might stay until the end. They might stay in literally no matter how many they lose, because at the end, like, can he run the presidency from Guantanamo or whatever they're going to send him? I don't know.
Never know, though. DeSantis could mount some never before seen comeback. You never know. Never know. Everyone counted.
Not DeSantis. Have you heard him laugh?
Let Ron be Ron.
Zero Billionaire says, did you guys play that Ari Drennan Twitter video of Matt Walsh filming two guys in adult diapers with swastika tattoos fighting? I did not.
I think I've seen that old one. Yeah, that's him. That's
just right-wing Twitter now.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that's like in the put in the file with like James Lindsay swiping a sword around in his front yard, like just guys doing dumb reactionary shit in their lawns and on a crappy camera.
It's never embarrassing to practice your sword kata when you're, just setting up a tripod.
Yeah.
Tortuguita says, whites are trending towards extinction. Whose fault is that anyway? Walshy boy? Maybe the definition of whiteness, that one stop makes you non-white. Not sure what that means.
Is it? Yeah, I mean, like whiteness. Look, like any white guys out there, you should not be thinking of yourself as a white guy. Like that's a very ridiculous thing. You should be thinking of yourself as a brother, sibling, a worker, like son. Like if you're a white guy, like get over that. It's impossible to like think of yourself as a white guy and not basically be a Nazi, in my opinion.
Wonderbreader, the infamous Lee Atwater quote about race politics is now working itself in reverse and has brought it into politics about queer people. Left is deaf. Replacement theory actually gives the game away. They claim America is not a racist country, but they are terrified of becoming a minority. Why? Aren't they the first ones to argue that minorities in the U.S. should be grateful? Yeah, grateful.
You're right, exactly. This is a great place for minorities. It's one of the best places in the world.
Well, if you take them at their word that they're not bigots, then, which is a real stretch. The only other thing is that they're admitting that they think that like we overtly oppress all minority groups. And so they're just literally afraid of a day that where it becomes like 51% people of color in America and we just like pass a law to enslave white people. And like that's the only other explanation for it. And if it's hard to imagine someone believing that in good faith, but not being like, at least partially bigoted.
Yep. Pizza says, did you get a slice after the show yesterday? I did. I was having a real craving.
Low blood sugar moment.
Yep, exactly. Data says, thank you guys. Bingo Dango says, this landlord discourse is so relevant. Was just in the conversation with a friend of mine who can't afford to buy a house due to how high rates are. And they were told that they should just buy a house with an in-law apartment, live in the apartment and rent the house and live for free. Some people are just so out of touch, it's mind-boggling.
You should haunt your own house. But that's what they pitch on House Hunters now. Not, I watch a lot of House Hunters in the morning. That's so many episodes now are about people buying a house not to just live in, but for some sort of flipping scheme. Or we have to be landlords. I'm gonna live in one room and rent out the other 3 or 4.
Also, as a renter, a scenario where the other unit in a 2-family house is lived in by a live-in landlord is the worst scenario you can have. You don't want to live in the same house as the landlord.
I can't get like that dynamic, Brandon, where it's like, yeah, I'm moving to Costa Rica, and it's like, well, we can't afford this kind of house, but if we spend a little bit more money, take out a little bit more mortgage, we can be landlords and rent this out. And it's like, we're literally like having banks finance retirees to go be landlords in other countries.
And it also just doesn't work. But like, you do get the sense that this is where like real estate becomes like a scam, because it's clear that people like are thinking of it like, I don't want to work for the rest of my life. Working for the rest of my life sucks. So I'm going to opt out of that system and have some other sucker do it, like pay me their part of their paycheck so they can pay my mortgage for me. And it's just like, come on, guy. Like, at what point do you realize that you're the bad guy in this situation?